Minneapolis has been under siege from the federal government after thousands of ICE agents flooded the streets as part of Operation Metro Surge. Renee Good, a 37-year-old mother, was shot and killed by an ICE agent on January 9th while driving away from an ICE raid. Alix Pretti, also 37 years old, was an ICU nurse at the VA who was shot multiple times on January 24th while he recorded ICE agents on a street in South Minneapolis. The fear and intimidation has many people and their families in hiding from federal immigration officials. Tens of thousands of people in Minneapolis and surrounding areas have taken to the streets, protesting the occupation of the federal government and demanding accountability for the actions of ICE agents. The standoff between the Trump administration and state and local officials have left a lot of questions about states' rights versus the federal government. Nothing about this is normal. When does this chaos end? Well, joining me on the Life Unscripted podcast is the former Hennepin County attorney in Minneapolis, Mike Freeman. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Just for some background, he's served twice in that position for 24 years and has prosecuted many high-profile cases, including the George Floyd Murder Trial. So we're going to have you break down the legalities of what's happening now in Minneapolis with the ICE raids and get your perspectives surrounding those. But I think it's also important for people who may not be aware of you. You have a political background. You were raised in a political family. Your father was a governor. You've been immersed in this your entire life. Give us a little idea. I want to hear a story about Orville Freeman, your father, who was governor, and you lived in that world. Tell us about him.
Well, my father was elected governor when I was 6, and so I recall going to lots of county fairs and lots of ice cream socials. In fact, I learned early on that if you were quiet, spoke only when you were spoken to, and smiled, you get extra ice cream, which is probably why I was a little bit of a roly-poly kid, because I liked ice cream.
Who doesn't?
Yeah, but it was an incredible education to listen to public policy being developed at the dinner table. And Dad took me with him, and my mother was deeply involved in all the campaigns. And we talked public policy at dinner, even when there wasn't company. And that was a real education. And not only the policy, but the morality and the right and the wrong. And that stuck with me, particularly during the hard days when you had to make decisions as county attorney, that you were struggling very hard to find out what was the right thing to do.
I'm guessing Hubert Humphrey was probably sat at that dinner table once or twice.
He did, and he and Dad were very close friends way back to college when they were the Big Ten debating champions together. And it was quite a thing because Humphrey was ebullient and verbose and very wordy, but very charismatic. And Orville was methodical and organized. And between the two of them, I can't imagine a better debate team.
Hey, I want to tell you about a product that I absolutely love. They are my Cozy Earth pajamas. They are just soft and buttery, and I can't tell you, I would actually prefer to wear them all day long. Now, I have arranged a 41% discount for my listeners, for my viewers. If you go on to CozyEarth.com and use the promo code AKLife, you are going to get 41% off. Just think about that. Not just pajamas, but also socks and sheets and pillowcases. Just be cozy. It's that time of year. And this is important. The 41% off deal with Cozy Earth only lasts until February 28th. So act fast. So you grew up in the world of politics and public service. So I think that again, this is a unique perspective to talk about what's happening with Minneapolis and the ICE agents. How far is this from any kind of precedence that we've ever seen when it comes to something like the situation we have going on?
It's extraordinary. In fact, I was an American political history major in college. I can't recall any time over a sustained period of time when this kind of anarchy has existed. Having been privileged to be Hennepin County attorney and being involved in the law world and trying to make sure that people were treated fairly, that the police officers did their job to keep us safe, but also followed the rules, and making sure that we only charged cases and found people or participated in prosecuting people that had committed crimes for people who actually had committed crimes, and we had sufficient admissible evidence to prove that. There were guardrails around what we did and how we did that. This ICE invasion, which is the only word you can use, what's happened in Minneapolis, and frankly, throughout the entire state of Minnesota, because rural Minnesota has folks that aren't leaving their house too. And they can't go to the local cafe because they don't know if ICE is lurking out there to grab them. I mean, this is unheard of. It's profound, and it's got to stop.
Looking at the normal legal federal law in deportation cases, you kind of stepped through that just a little bit. Explain what is typical to happen versus what is happening now or what should be happening right now.
Huge caveat. I was a state prosecutor, and I'm not totally intimately familiar with immigration law. That wasn't our business. But I do know enough that people who were born in this country are U.S. citizens, and they have rights. And some of them, their parents had come from other countries. We are a country of immigrants. My great-great-great-grandfather was a Swede, and he married my great-great-grandmother, who is Norwegian. Now, if people aren't from Minnesota, don't know, Swedes and Norwegians don't necessarily get along. They had to come to this country to get away from their families who didn't support the marriage. But you come here, you have rights. And even if you're not a citizen, you have rights. You can't be arrested without probable cause. You can't be deported. You can't be removed from your community. The doors to your house can't be broken down without a judicial warrant. These things that are happening today, breaking into houses, seizing people and arresting them, no probable cause other than many times the color of their skin, is simply outrageous and unacceptable. And that's why the people of Minnesota have got up in arms in 20 below weather. And I just want to tell you, having been born in this state, and I enjoy the cold, but as I get older, not as much. And these people who've been out there working hard, trying to video what ICE agents are doing and protesting, have shown a lot of courage as part of who Minnesotans are.
Which is their legal right to do.
Absolutely.
They have a legal right to do that.
Absolutely.
And as we're seeing people who are being taken out of their cars, whether it's at a school, a parking lot, racial profiling seems to be pretty clear here. What are the guardrails? I mean, what in this situation where people are being taken out without a warrant? And even now, some people they're saying, okay, you need a judicial warrant. They're just bypassing that altogether, some of these ICE agents.
Well, that's right. And it's really outrageous. You see them using the butts of their guns to breaking windows. I can't remember more than one or two police officers breaking car windows ever. And ICE guys do it all the time. And they haul people out of cars, people who are disabled, people who are pregnant, people in front of their kids. You see them pushing people into piles of snow. In the Pretti homicide or execution, which, and I don't use that word easily, really was what it was, he was trying to protect two women who were being pushed by ICE agents in a snow pile. And not just pushed, but thrust. And he was trying to protect them. But we see that all the time. And that horrible, horrible picture of this darling 5-year-old little boy wearing a cap with ears and a Snoopy backpack, being arrested and thrown in with his father. The school officials were there and say, we'll take him to his home. No, we're going to take him. And then the minute they arrested him here in Minnesota, they slammed him in an airplane and flew him to Texas. That's just outrageous. That's so un-American, it gets my blood boiling.
And the trauma that these people are experiencing is going to last for a long time, as well as just the community, any community that's been affected. And pretty much everyone has been hit in Minnesota. Certainly Minneapolis has been the target. So what is the path forward here with in Minnesota with these ICE raids? How much power does Governor Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey I think that's confusing to a lot of people, like, not who's in charge, but the power. If the federal government is bypassing the Constitution and ICE agents are illegally grabbing people off the streets, what's our path forward from here?
Well, the first path forward is in the federal courts, because it doesn't matter if you're an ICE agent or not. You have to obey the laws of the state you're in. And for example, in the 2 homicides that have occurred, the state has the right to prosecute those people for murder or manslaughter. And I think the authorities are beginning to work on those cases, notwithstanding the fact that the federal authorities, ICE, has not allowed our State Bureau of Criminal Apprehension on a crime scene. Our BCA, the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, is very professional. I've worked with them for 24 years. Do they make mistakes? Sure. Did I make mistakes? Sure. Very professional doing that. They've been on, particularly now, the Pretti crime scene, tried to be there. ICE wouldn't let them. They got a judicial warrant to let them be there to do their job, to preserve the crime scene and to take the things they needed. ICE wouldn't let them. And then...
and now they're not part of the investigation. Right? The federal government is saying, we're going to do this.
Us state folks always had a little challenge sometimes with the federales. They had nicer offices and nicer suits in their lawyers and their, agents. But that was kind of comfortable and kind of kidding. But we worked very closely I worked with Andy Lugar, who's the United States Attorney, intimately. And he was a great guy to work with. And our BCA and the FBI worked together, and they worked together on all of the major serious homicides dealing with either feds or state, and particularly the cop cases. And it was important that they did that. Now, the Trump administration has thrown all that out, and they've got everybody running around as armed masked thugs, which is just, it's totally un-American. That's the least thing I can say.
And I know immigration wasn't your specialty, but when you have a federal judge who basically, orders an end to this Operation Metro Surge, how can that be implemented? Even when a federal judge puts it out there and they're not obeying it, is it just focusing on now the midterms? Is that because it feels like in many ways the federal government is not obeying the law, obeying the Constitution?
Well, that's always a frustration. Judge Floyd B. Olson in Minnesota ordered that strikebreakers not be attacked by thugs at that time. They weren't thugs, they were private citizens hired by a certain group of people to fight the strikers. And the federal court, supposedly somebody said, well, Governor, you better get your marshals out there to obey that, to enforce that order. It is awkward. You're not going to have Minneapolis cops draw a line and the feds on the other side and the Minneapolis and the State Patrol on the other and march at each other. That's totally unseemly, and lots of innocent people would get killed. But what we're seeing in Congress with holding up spending bills, what we're seeing with Bovino, who was the Border Patrol czar, who is just crazy, kicked out, and now the rumor is he's going to be forced to be retired. When Kristi Noem, the head of Homeland Security, being ignored at cabinet meetings, wow, that's being hung out, and people threatening to bring articles of impeachment if he doesn't fire her. The public has a great deal of strength here. The public in the streets, the public demonstrating, peacefully demonstrating, the public taking pictures of what they're doing, what ICE is doing. That is all legal. That's the people. The people control this. When I was privileged to be county attorney for 24 years and 8 years in Minnesota Senate, I served the people. That's who elected me. That's who paid my paycheck, and that's who I owed my obedience to. And the ICE people have forgotten that, and the good folks of Minnesota are reminding them who they work for.
It's that time of year where the air is dry, our skin is dry, and we need hydration. We need a facial in a bottle, and you can find that at Love Indus. Also, they have a serum that is beautiful, Botox in a tube. These products will nourish and they'll plump your skin. They are fantastic, and I have a deal for you. In fact, you can get 21% off of all the products at loveindus.com. That's where you can find them. Also, look in my show notes and click on the link for 21% off for great skincare with Love Indus. It's good to actually, in some instances, it doesn't feel like there's a lot of optimism right now, at least where we're at today. Things could change a lot between now and when this podcast drops. It seems things are changing on a daily basis. But even though the president said he was going to retreat just a little bit, but sometimes he changes his mind every 30 seconds. So.
It's great to have Bovino out of here. It's great to see Kristi Noem pushed in the corner. It's great to see some Republican leaders in the United States Senate saying enough is enough. It's good to see presently the ICE budget being held out from being supported financially. It's good to see the people in the streets. The neighbors here in Minnesota have just done a marvelous job of feeding, supporting, driving people. Although I got to say, I've heard folks who, are third or fourth generation Minnesotans saying they're scared to get in their car to drive to take people food because they think ICE could pull them out of their car. Well, I shouldn't be. I shouldn't be pulling anybody out of cars except these criminals they say that there are so many of, which is not true. But the people power means something. I grew up in the Vietnam War era, and I was in the military, but I was opposed to the war. And I saw people marching. I saw people doing and I marched before I was sworn in as a military officer when I was a college student because I thought the war was wrong and we needed to lend our voices to it. And that stopped that war. There's no question.
I wonder where the Trump administration has said that they're taking the worst of the worst. They're going after immigrants who have committed horrible crimes. Clearly, what we're seeing is not the case. I'm wondering why there isn't more pressuring of, then give us the list. Give us a list of everyone that you've arrested and give us the list of what they're accused of doing. But that I don't see that. I don't think I've ever seen a report. And if there are some,
But I think it's improving. For example, when you seize a person, when the government holds a person, the person has a right to file a writ of habeas corpus, which basically says to the government, by what right do you hold them? Okay. And the federal judges in Minnesota have been granting a huge number of these. In fact, I saw a statistic that said across the country, 357 federal judges have considered habeas corpus arising out of ICE seizures, and all but 20 have granted those habeas corpus petitions. Now, the ICE is refusing to comply with them. Well, the judges are calling the head of ICE in to explain what's happening, and things are changing because, the administration has federal judges and the people in the streets telling them this is wrong and they can't do this. And we're seeing changes in the administration, thankfully, not enough. And they keep holding out to get something for them reverting to do the right thing. But it's some progress.
We've heard it said from the president and others, Kristi Noem, the ICE agents have absolute federal immunity.
Balderdash.
It's a good word.
Yeah, it's better than some of the other words we've heard that I was told you can't say publicly. Balderdash you can get away with.
Okay.
It's simply not true. It's not absolute. There are some questions. There are some immunities in certain circumstances. There are not immunities for ICE officers pulling their gun out and shooting Pretti 10 plus times.
What about ICE agents being charged for state crimes? And what might those be? Any
individual that's within the jurisdiction of the state of Minnesota who commits a crime against a person is subject to the jurisdiction. Those agents that shot Good and Pretti were in the jurisdiction of Minnesota, and they can be prosecuted here. Now, there are certain cases which can be removed to federal court, and there's certain cases of immunity, but not absolute. And anyone who said that like Secretary Noem, are simply wrong. The vice president said it. He should know better. He went to a top flight law school. He's supposed to be a smart guy. He was absolutely wrong, which I said before on CNN, and got a lot of calls back saying, right on, to say it like it is. There is not absolute. And what I'm hoping is that the state authorities are moving forward as best they can. Now, when the feds will not allow our State Bureau of Criminal Apprehension on the crime scene and will not cooperate, it makes it harder. But it still doesn't make it impossible. And I know I know there's some things moving, not as fast as perhaps they might be, but they're moving.
Let's talk about some of the tools that prosecutors could be using right now in the ICE agents that are terrorizing people in the Twin Cities and the state.
Well, both the Attorney General and the Hennepin County Attorney agreed to set up a private portal for people to submit their stories and what they had heard and their statements. That's good, and my understanding is that some good information is coming from there. They've also gotten, in the public domain, a number of videos. I mean, everywhere ICE goes, there are whistles blowing and cameras working, which is wonderful. They're collecting a lot of those, and that's important. They're also using their other investigatory agencies as they can, and of course, prosecutors always have the tool of an investigative grand jury. That's a grand jury that isn't deciding whether or not an indictment or a charge should come down. It's a grand jury, investigative grand jury, has the power of subpoenas to force people to come and to testify under oath. So that could be used to find out which ICE agents were present at the time Pretti was shot and to try to get them to testify what they're saying. I'm sure Trump White House will insist, and Mr. Miller will insist, that they fight those subpoenas. Well, how many illegal things are you going to do to fight justice for people? There are a lot of tools there, and they're starting to use them, and I think that's good.
One way to elevate your look is by a pair of great eyeglasses. And I have a lot of them. I have prescription eyeglasses. I have sunglasses. Why? Well, because, I need to see, and also to protect my eyes from the bright sunshine. And I have found some very stylish eyewear from Aquila. Here they have eco-friendly frames, so many different colors. We've got classic black, and they are affordable. They're made in LA, but they're not just for movie stars. And I have a great deal for you, for all of my listeners. Just use the promo code AKLIFE, and you will get 10% off. 10% off of any of the frames there at aquila.la. You can also find the deal on my show notes. Just click on that link, and you get 10% off of Aquila eyewear. We have seen what happened, of course, following the murder of George Floyd. I know that you were one of the lead prosecutors on the team that eventually ended up convicting the jury, Derek Chauvin, of which I think he's serving, is it life in prison?
20 years.
20 years. Okay. What was that experience like, kind of stepping away now from, what's going on in Minneapolis for you? In your position as the Hennepin County prosecutor, what was that experience like, just working that case and having so much media spotlight on you?
Well, it was such a tragedy that George Floyd was murdered by Derek Chauvin. And that's what it was. It was an execution. It was murder. And because of some of the medical complications, it was a difficult case to charge and to prove to the jury. And I was privileged to work with the Attorney General, Keith Ellison, and a wonderful team he put together. I mean, Steve Schlischer out of the Robbins firm is one of the best trial lawyers I know, and Jerry Blackwell, 2 years after he tried pro bono, by the way, for free, is now a federal judge and deserving of it. We had great folks. We had in trying the case, we had really good people doing the investigations, and we had the courageous young person who took that video. Now, video really can't win a case by itself, and although we had that video early on, we had other evidence we needed to collect before we could charge and move forward. But I was glad to sign the amended complaint charging second-degree murder with Keith Ellison, and he took the lead because he had lots of good folks doing it, and it required both of us, frankly, to do it, and I was proud to work with Keith.
Yeah, that was just a case that really made the headlines for so long. And of course, we know what happened, civil unrest, and really the city has kind of been trying to, recalibrate and reset since then. And this is not helping. Is it hard for you to sit back in the role that you used to play in Minneapolis and to think about maybe what's happening with, the Hennepin County Attorney's Office and just attorneys in general who are responding to all of this? What kind of chaos and I would think 24/7, it probably feels like they're working constantly because responding to things that, ICE agents are doing, it changes daily. They must be exhausted.
I'm sure they are. Yeah, these are very difficult times. And I didn't sleep much for a couple of weeks. I had 1,000 demonstrators outside my home for 8 nights in a row, which meant I couldn't even stay in my own house. Why people who were demonstrating thought I would make better decisions with no sleep, I don't know. But apparently they thought it was. And I know there's been a lot of pressure on a lot of people in this situation too. But there are good people working on these cases. And Minnesotans are committed to justice. There's a deep rock sense of right and wrong in the state. It doesn't mean that doesn't occur in other places. But maybe it's because we live in 20 below temperatures around here. But there are really, really decent folks who want to see it done right. And when I was privileged to serve in the Minnesota Senate, there were a lot of Republicans that I worked with closely that had the same levels of decency. We had differences of opinion. And in those days, at least, it didn't get violent and it didn't get as personally nasty as it seems to now. But people were committed to doing the right thing as they saw fit, following the rules of the game. And the rules of the game, you can't arrest people without probable cause. You can't detain people without charges. You can't immediately grab them and send them out of state. What ICE is doing is not acceptable. It's not acceptable to American people elsewhere. I'm so pleased to see the demonstrations in cities around the country. I'm so pleased to see in our rural areas, rural Minnesota, people there, no neighbors who are afraid to leave their house, and they're taking them food, they're watching for their kids, they're doing their shopping for them, and they're also standing at the schools to make sure that ICE can't get near schools in places they don't belong, which I'm really proud of Minnesotans for doing that.
Well, I like leaving it on a high note, and that you really believe that people out there protesting are making a difference, people who are standing up, and that eventually, hopefully, that tide will turn and we'll get through this awful mess. And the state of Minnesota, the country is looking at how this will go down, and we've set a great example for fighting back against injustice here. And Mike Freeman, it's such a pleasure to sit down here and talk with you. You've added, so many layers to this conversation and perspective. I think it's really important for people who are listening to Life Unscripted and watching.
Well, at my age, based on my experience, it's wonderful to have someone listen to me talk once again. So thank you for giving me the privilege of being here.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much for subscribing to Life Unscripted. Remember, when you purchase any item from my deals page, I get paid and you support my podcast. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.